everyone. Good evening. It's Monday, and we are here for Where's Your Heart? Championing vulnerability as a core human strength. Happy to be here again. Hello, Royce. Oh, I just look forward to these days now.
I'm so glad.
I do. I look forward to them.
I'm grateful for the time. That's for sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh, so how you doing?
Honestly, it's been a long, horrible, shitty week. I'm just there you go. That's the truth of it. I didn't get into the PhD program that I applied to.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So yeah. And I hadn't realized like how much that was really kind of driving everything in my life. Like I was really pushing everything toward that. So it really, like first off, I'm just having to really re-examine stuff, and have some conversations, see whether it's worth reapplying next year, or whether it's time to apply to one of the schools I'd really want to do the work at. Unfortunately, that's outside the state. So I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on there. So
a lot of thinking that's going to have to happen. Yeah, it's been a challenging week.
Yeah. How's the new house?
Oh my gosh. I like every time somebody asks me that, I'm just like, I'm just happy to have a place to live. But I like it. And everybody's good with it. We just had a party for my middle and youngest child for their birthdays, and that went well.
Yay!
Yes, had fun with that. So it was a nice way to end last week. The start of this week, it's kind of back to that challenge. But I'm get through. Get through. Just like you're gonna get through and figure out what you're gonna do. I'm gonna get through and not hit anyone. That's how I'm gonna handle. That's how I'm gonna handle that,
including not neighbors who leave nice notes.
Yes, that's my new neighbor decided instead of coming over and being like, "Hi, I'm your neighbor and welcome to the neighborhood," she left me a really interesting note to inform me that there's informal laws that take place on this street that I should have known, but because I'm new, she gave me a pass. So, yeah, this is good.
I know where my parking spot is. Hi.
So if you ever come to visit, park in front of Beverly's house. Oh, wait, I didn't say that. Hey, Kelly. So Kelly is here, as always. Good to have you here. And while we're doing this, because she is watching this on YouTube, just a reminder to please hit the subscription button and take part of being one of our followers for this awesome show. And then, of course, hitting the notification bell so you know when new episodes air.
Yeah. And a second part of that is starting in April.
Yeah.
So we have like 3 more shows that we're doing that are streaming to Facebook. Starting in April, we'll only be streaming to YouTube. And then, of course, we can share that to all sorts of places. But there's a whole bunch of oh, look at this. Here, don't listen to us. Listen to Kelly. Subscribe to the YouTubes. What's really funny is in my head hearing her say that because it's the best. Oops, sorry.
Now I gotta hear what that sounds like audio wise. So
we will,
yeah,
because she'll be on the show in a few weeks.
Well, considering we had a very challenging last week, we're still gonna go ahead and do our gratitude. There is obviously got to be something out of the chaos and some of the disappointments that you can, that we're going to be able to come up with something. That's my goal. That is my goal.
All right, you get to go first then.
Oh, dang. Okay, well, let's see.
Here, we'll buy some time. Hi, Nicola. Here to heckle and support with love.
Definitely here to heckle and support her brother.
I was gonna say I hope so. I would hope she would be here to heckle.
Her brother.
Yes.
So I will say that I'm going through learning new things with divorce. It seems like I thought that the only thing I had to deal with was the fact that I was mourning the loss of a relationship, of a marriage. And I thought, okay, well, that's it. And then I'll be fine. Like, that's the only thing I have to mourn. And it turns out there's a lot of other things that go into what divorce means. And so I would say that I am grateful for those who have experienced it, that I can turn to, and have them talk me off the ledge when I have moments of just complete um, outrage, and just having to remember that anything that happens, I have to remember about my kids, and I definitely do not want them to see me in a light that I would be disappointed in myself. So thank you to you. Thank you to my best friend M, Jeannie, another friend of mine I've been able to reach out to, and just, you know, just know that what I'm feeling is what is absolutely normal. And this too shall pass. It will just take a while.
You said this too shall pass, and the first thought into my head was, yep, every turd got to go. That's where my brain went, was just like, okay. Well, I mean, and actually, I guess as rough as stuff's like been lately, I guess I do have a couple of gratitudes, and it's actually like, so you called, and I was in the middle of Keller's buying food for date night, because I was trying to overdo date night, and like, because stuff's just been so raw and shitty lately that I'm like, all right, I gotta have something to look forward to, so I'm gonna smoke some steak for date night. So it was just
this was good, by the way, I have to say.
It was wonderful. But it was a wonderful moment also of being reminded that even when I'm in a really shitty place, that being able to love and support somebody is still possible, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful to head back to therapy. I've got my appointment this week, and
that sounds wonderful.
So I mean, I feel, again, it's also one of those things where it's like, that's also privilege. All I had to do was a few texts to dive back in. He's not taking insurance anymore, but okay, that's okay. It's not going to stand in the way. Like, there's a lot of privilege inherent with a lot of that stuff. So I'm not only grateful for it, but it also is one of those, another one of those humble moments of, well, shit, there's a lot of folks who don't have that to reach out for. And especially right now, like, we all know that COVID's making literally every fucking thing worse.
Oh yes.
So yeah. And I'm grateful for friends, I think, is the big thing this week. So
agreed. Yeah. I feel like I should say I'm grateful for our audience never making fun of us trying to figure out where we're supposed to look. I feel like it's been a year of having to deal with talking on a computer, and I still, what show is this that I've now done? And I'm still like, do I look here? Do I look there? Where I look? Do I look down? And then when there's multiple people, like, they must think that I'm like tweaking or something. Like, what's wrong with her eyes? Where's she looking? So thank you, audience, for not like making fun of us when those moments happen.
And I'm wondering,
I don't have it down.
I'm learning how to look at the camera without the ring light in my glasses. There you go. We're learning.
Yes, we are learning. Well, we are going to start with this week's topic. Interesting that we were talking about COVID and everything that it's changed in everyone's lives. But our biggest reason for being here today is that we wanted to at least give a moment to show appreciation for those who were on the front lines having to deal with it, and talk about their experience and what they had to deal with in the process. Now, Royce, I'm going to inform you right now, you're going to do both introductions because I didn't open the email.
The email that you sent.
I know.
Just for the record.
I sent it.
I know. Like, that's what I'm saying. Let's just be clear to the audience.
I was like, that's gonna take longer than you just reading it. So I appreciate you, Royce. You do you, and introduce our fine guest.
I mean, what's really fun about that is it's another chance for us to point out to the audience that you're doing all of this work behind the scenes. That is I don't know. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
You are welcome.
And I think the first thing I want to point out about the topic is, so we had 3 guests planned for today.
Yes.
Our third guest was a registered nurse. And if you want to know what it's like being a registered nurse right now, she was called into work because that's kind of what
happens when you're a registered nurse.
Well, I mean,
just working in the field.
it wasn't that way 5 years ago. I used to work in hospitals, and usually there was an amount of discretion and certain boundaries that nurses could keep, and doctors and medical professionals. But what's happening right now, as COVID has run through not just the general population, but it's run through the medical population as well. And so you've got all sorts of terrible things happening and breakdowns happening to medical professionals left and right. So, and it's not just COVID, and it's not just my doctor got COVID or something. It's mental stuff. Yep. It's complete fatigue. It's all of deferred maintenance on the human body that shows up when we stress it too hard. A year of this kind of stress hormones, cortisol will eat you a fucking alive in a year. So yeah, just like right there, right off the bat, I have to notice that our third guest couldn't be with us. Yep. And in the meantime, what we have are two wonderful guests. Our first one is a licensed clinical social worker. She's been in the field for 25 years. Last 14 years have been in the medical field. She's spent the time this last year working on the front line of COVID by serving patients in the ICUs and the emergency room. And bluntly, social workers were some of my best friends when I was working in hospitals, because it's incredible work, and their caseloads are always about 85 times what they should be. She's proud of the fact that after 20 years of being a bachelor's level social worker, she went back to school for her master's degree at nearly 40 years old. Woohoo! A single mom and working full time. And it was the most challenging thing she's ever done. But within 3 years, she was licensed clinically and became an accredited social work case manager, which is fucking huge. And I have huge respect for that. So let's bring Amy Flinko out.
Hello, Amy. Hi. Good to have you here. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so excited. I'm such a sucker for going back to school in our middle. I'm such a sucker for that. I love it. And our second guest is a preschool teacher, a planetarium presenter, and a barista before falling ass backwards into medicine. Despite 4 years as an EMT and a registered nurse, his greatest achievement was driving a school bus blasting "Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?"
Good stuff.
For 2 summers in Indiana. He wants everyone to know that PTSD is more common than you think. A hell yeah to that. Mm-hmm. Let's bring out Ted Rossini.
Yay! Hey, Ted.
Hi, Ted.
Hello.
And we have to mention, yes, both the Teresa appreciation post and Nicola, go.
I can only imagine what's going to come out.
For sibling rivalry case, like, I'm the one on the podcast, and she's still upstaging me. I love you, Nikki. You will always be my big sister. But
look at that. That's my brother. She's proud.
She is. I know.
Oh my God. That's fantastic. All right. Where are we starting?
I would like to say that I feel that this would probably be an opportunity, because I feel like people may think that because we have frontline workers on here, it's obviously going to go a certain direction. I feel like we could do this without it becoming a political thing. I think, honestly, the past 4 years have probably made it really hard for you guys, but I think I would like to start by saying first, thank you for doing something that I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine what you've gone through just to keep people alive and sane and just feel like there's somebody there for them during this time. Added on the regular stuff you do, you have to deal with COVID too. So thank you very much for doing your jobs. That's first where I would want to start.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, having worked in ICUs, worked in emergency rooms, a trauma 1 level 1 trauma unit, like the pace of that life was already fucking nuts. And then adding COVID, I just thank you guys for what you're doing, and and the way that you're doing it too. Because yeah, this is crazy. What's one thing you wish people knew about what you're going through or what you're seeing on a daily basis?
The
I wish
impact that it has on
Oh, go ahead.
families. I'm sorry, Ted.
No, go ahead, Amy. Impact on families is a great topic.
Oh
No.
my gosh, these people, they have no idea. The people we see in the ICUs, I worked in the neuro ICU at one point, and
Oh, wow.
people who didn't have COVID, maybe they had significant strokes or
Yep.
they had other traumatic brain injuries, and their families couldn't come in and be with them. So I had one gentleman one time who had a stroke and lost his eyesight and couldn't speak, and he couldn't have family in there with him to help him. And so, here we are trying to figure it out. And I literally spent every day on the phone just talking to his wife because she was tied that, hey, I can't be there. I can't help him. And you guys are doing the best you can do, but he needs us to be there with him. And when the time came for him to finally get ready to, discharge from the ICU and go to rehab or whatever, she was like, no, he's coming home because I know how to meet his needs. We know how to take care of him and everything. And that's what they ended up doing. But it just, the toll that it took just on those situations, like he didn't have COVID, but COVID impacted him and his family so much that it was like, they all are going to have PTSD now.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a thing. I think that's the, I mean, that's one of the terrifying parts about this whole thing. The situation you mentioned, folks with stroke who are often, wow, I can't talk. Here we go. Often disoriented. It happens a lot when I worked even in the oncology ward, when you're dealing with people with all sorts of treatments and things. Just basic disorientation, and to wake up and have a familiar face in the room or hear a familiar voice in the room is so vital. And so, yeah, you've got a whole chunk of care that is missing. And the human animal, like, we think of food, water, shelter as social or as human needs. Social is a human need, and when that's not being met, it's really, really awful. God.
It is. That connection is vital, like in all aspects. Our kids not being able to connect with their friends at school and so on and so forth. That connection is just really key for everybody.
Yeah.
What about you, Ted?
Heroes need healthcare. And I mean, that extends beyond even just who you're necessarily thinking of as a hero, or even necessarily the scope of this show right now as who we're defining as heroes. But I am a little bit controversial in both the nursing and the EMT field because I balk at being called a hero, because I feel like that, long before COVID came along, was an excuse to say we can pay these people minimum wage or less. They will show up because it means something to them. It's meaningful work, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and by the way, all that trauma they're carrying from 5 DOAs or whatever, because they're heroes, they don't need healthcare. They're going to be heroes and bear it. And there's just so much evidence to the contrary of that. So that's where I'll start with my big takeaway is I appreciate all the love, especially as a nurse, I'm getting. Be sure you're showing that love to the people you're not thinking of, whether it's a waiter, whether it's a door holder, whether it's a temperature, whatever. But also remember, all those people, all of us, really, anyone who went through the pandemic in some fashion probably needs at least a little healthcare right now. So.
Yeah.
And as Kelly has put it, yes, Ted, yes. I absolutely agree with that statement. So, and I hope this doesn't sound morbid. I was really trying to figure out a way to ask this question without it sounding morbid. But I mean, you work in a field where you have to deal with life and death. How did you even handle when the increase just seemed to be happening even more than you were normally seeing in your everyday life?
The weirdest thing about it is the acute trauma is easy. I had a guy come talk to my paramedic class one time, and he said paramedics and firefighters never lose it on busy days, and you never have disciplinary problems at busy houses. The paramedic captain screams at everyone and goes nuts over a piece of paperwork after a dry spell, like when they haven't been doing anything.
Yeah.
And that's what's so weird about it, especially when I was working in a sniff for about 6 months, was it would go in these weird phases where I would almost have to remind myself this was abnormal, because it was just such my normal at that point. But then suddenly it'd be like, oh, I have really low energy. Oh, I have this. I have whatever reaction wise, and react to that. So it's really interesting how normal it gets. And the reality is, most of the fallout from this, we're not there yet. Like
Oh God.
that's gonna be when this is done, which it's very possible. I mean, if history repeats, like that means we're not dealing with this until we're in our 80s and 90s, because there's going to be something after this and something after this, because one tumult follows another. That's very possible. We don't know, but that's when you deal with it. And I'll just put in a real quick thing. If you want to go look at the literature, it's really fascinating when you look at the quote unquote greatest generation and the last years of their lives, because that was when they could finally deal with it.
Yeah.
And likewise, how different that is by country, because obviously the experience of someone who was born in the 20s living in the United States, even if they went to war, was vastly different from someone living in Russia or Poland, Africa, Israel, Palestine, like it's just so different all over the world. And the traumas showed themselves differently, and when they could be dealt with, or in the case of the Middle East, still haven't been dealt with,
Oh yeah.
are at different times.
Talk about generational trauma. That's millennialational trauma or something. Like it's.
Yeah.
We've been doing trauma to each other for a long time there.
So we're just pointing out, Nicola brings up that housekeeping and janitorial are also frontline workers. They absolutely are.
Yeah.
And Sarah likes to point out, so true. So true.
Yeah, that's a so Amy, one of the joys of the work that I did in the hospital was that as a chaplain, I had a lot of freedom who I cared for, right? And so caring for housekeeping and janitorial was on my list. My impression of the social workers that I worked with would often send me to the people that they couldn't take care of because the caseloads are just so overwhelming and heavy, because as a case manager, you like, there's a number that you're supposed to have and that they tell you in school you should have. I don't know what that number is anymore, but I remember my folks talking about it literally being, no, I have 3 times what I'm supposed to by my contract. Like, what's it like? How do you like you got into this profession because you have a big heart and you want to care for people. How do you do that with the people that aren't on your case files?
So mostly I found that, taking care of each other was key. And oftentimes that ended up being providers mostly.
Yeah.
They had the hardest time. You can't watch people die. I mean, I know they always watch people die, but I mean, just one right after another, and just so sick and lingering for so long sometimes. And it was taxing on them. And I'll never forget this, because I didn't wear scrubs or anything like that. We just dressed business professional, and one time I went to work and I wore a dress and I had on some nice boots, and I just looked nice, and maybe I had a good hair day, who knows. But I one of the providers approached me and they had tears in their eye. They were like, you just bring joy because you look so nice. You're not dressed in all this garb that we have to wear to go into these COVID rooms. It's just refreshing to see somebody just look normal. And
Jeez.
that meant the world to me, just the littlest things that we could be there for these people and just listen to them, what they were experiencing just on that level. And sometimes just them coming out of rooms with the imprint of the masks from their face and just sweat dripping down from the heat and just the pure exhaustion, and them just crying, and I felt like being there for them was most important. We actually had a couple of chaplains that had tested positive in the beginning stages of COVID and couldn't be at the hospital, and then they weren't allowed at the hospital for a while. So
Yep.
when there were scarce people there, it was mostly us, the nurses and the providers. And so we had to learn to be there for people in ways that we normally hadn't been.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a couple more comments here. I don't know who Diatom is, but
I don't either, but thank you.
He's glad you're here, Ted.
glad to be here for Ted and to meet the other wonderful frontline workers. Love it.
Well, thank you for being here to be here for them. We appreciate it.
And the thing I'll quickly add on, and it is somewhat of a shout out to social workers, but nurses as well have had to pick this up, is the lack of family being able to visit people that is being taken over or being ignored by healthcare personnel, whether it's the nurse, whether it's the janitor, the EKG tech, the RT. Like, we've had to take that role on.
And I want to be real clear again, like before we critique people for not being present the way they want to be, because let's be clear, people are not in nursing or social work to fucking buy a mansion. That's not gonna, if just pro tip there, if that's your goal, that's not going to work. Like, so we're talking about people who got into these industries because of their huge hearts. And so again, we're talking about nurses. In fact, I believe an emergency law was passed in California to allow them to exceed the number of patients that nurses are allowed to serve, which is just fucking ridiculous. Because
a real quick note on that.
Go.
Because it gets even more fun. And I'm going to try not to get on too many of my political soapboxes. But what's fascinating about that,
I'll hold it out for you,
is I will say there's a debate to be had whether or not that exception needed to be made. I'll say there's a debate to be had. Like, that debate is there to be had.
Yeah.
It should be being had with the nurses, and that's not happening. So that's piece number one.
Yep.
But piece number two is that's only happening in California. And the reason for that is California is one of few states that have laws limiting how many patients a nurse can take care of.
Yep.
So most other states, there's a few states that have nothing on the books.
Yep.
Most other states have guidelines. And California has the strictest and the most protective laws, which it literally goes, if you're in the ICU, I believe it's 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, depending on your state and depending on which ICU. And then 4-to-1 on a floor nurse, and down, depending on where you are and the acuity level. And there are other places where they just have none of that. There are some places where literally the guideline in one state, last I looked, it could have changed, but last I looked was 9-to-1. Let me tell you, just try and take care of 9-to-1 people, 9-to-1 friends at a party. Try talking to all of them without safely administering medicine. Like,
yeah.
Oh my gosh, oh my god, that's gotta make it difficult. I can't even imagine. I barely can handle 3 kids talking to me at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even imagine.
And it's actually I think it's a decent metaphor to use, stick 9 children who are all dependent on you.
Yeah.
You have to track all of their stories and their favorite foods and what fucking show they better not show up on their TV because they're going to fucking explode over it. Like, and now that's
actually not a metaphor. The television will continue.
So I have to highlight a couple of the comments. So Eric Whitehair says, I'm here to hear Ted on a soapbox. Make no mistake. And Diatom is Bex Clark. All right. So
wonderful RN coworker who I've both work alongside in one of my current roles, and my previous SNF experience, she had actually previously been there. So
yeah, and she mentions that and says, feeling the love for the many labors of so many nurse sisters and brothers are carrying, and so grateful for California patient nurse ratios. And yeah, shocking to imagine. It is. There's a lot there. Okay,
hey,
so
Ted, did you guys run into any issues with travelers Because I know in the hospitals during COVID, we lost a lot of full-time employees and ended up with so many travelers. And that was an issue in and of itself, because they, you know, had to get oriented, and then they'd get paid so much more than the rest of the nurses, and they didn't have to work on weekends, and they didn't have to work on holidays. And through this COVID, it was a huge thing. It was a huge thing.
So where I worked, we did not run into travelers. And that's, so to step back slightly, there's a bizarre hierarchy in nursing, and certain jobs are looked down upon, and those jobs either have nobody coming in the pipeline or have a ton of new grads coming in the pipeline because it's the only job they can get, or nurses from other countries that for whatever reason are being overlooked or discriminated against in some cases end up in a lot of those jobs. So where I was, that wasn't an issue. Now the traveler thing, this again, like this, we're getting into something that predates COVID trouble. It's exploded under COVID. So take what I just described, and that's in one city. That actually exists across the country. So any nurse right now that wants a job starting out can go to North Dakota or South Dakota for sure and be any type of nurse they want, almost no questions asked. You just got to have a license, because South Dakota is desperate for nurses because of how much it pays and the attraction. And what a lot of nurses living in South Dakota do is they go other places for higher salaries. So we have this whole weird shifting thing going around where, for instance, almost everyone in my nursing class that graduated almost 2 years ago that had a specific specialty they wanted to do is out of state right now. A few people had to leave the Bay Area and go to a different place in state to get their specialty. And then many other people have other things to make it work. But we have this weird thing going on where for staffing levels, for costs and things like that, because there's two types of travelers. And again, I'm sorry this is so complicated. Welcome to healthcare.
I'm just going to put up this comment as Ted goes on. Ain't no party like a Rossini rap party.
Go, Nicola.
So the travelers Amy is referring to is when a travel agency calls nurses and says, hey, we'll pay you. You go work for this hospital. This hospital just pays contracts, and that hospital absorbs very little cost in that. Obviously, they do have to pay something to that company, but all the healthcare costs, all the travel costs, living costs, et cetera, are done by that other company. There are also nurses who literally just travel for their jobs, who live in the farthest I've heard is, I know because they've been interviewed twice in local newspapers. There's a nurse who lives in Pennsylvania that commutes to San Francisco and Oakland 2 times a month because that's how much better the pay is here. And better because the cost of living here is so much higher. So it goes so much further. Apologies. So what that absolutely does end up causing is what Amy's saying happening now is you already had this place where you have some hospitals where you're having constant turnover. And then now because of COVID, that has gotten completely exacerbated. Where, because someone could be out for 10 days, 12 days. If they're actually sick, they're out till they feel better and can come back. And in most cases are probably being pressured to come back. When Royce was talking about like the good old days 5 years ago, I was kind of sitting there like getting my cigarette going, oh, let me tell you, kid. Because again, even before the pandemic, and I don't know, because I've heard that as recently as 5 years ago, it wasn't this way. But even before the pandemic, we were already, so many hospitals were right at the minimum number of staff to have that it's just blown up. Sincerest apologies, Nikki, you were right to call me out.
I mean, but the point that both of you are making is that our healthcare infrastructure nationwide is fuckered. It's the only way I can phrase it, because it's just from top to bottom, from left to right. It is just, it's a mess, and it was a mess before COVID. All this has done is, I mean, the early retirement rates, the leaving the industry rates are all going through the roof right now. So the next time someone wants to tell you that socialized healthcare doesn't work and we'll end up with Canada's problem, the reality is it already doesn't work for people working in social care or for medical care. So we have to try something different.
So I will find it for after this, because if I go looking for it now, I'll get lost in a rabbit hole. The American Conservative. This is not a left-leaning publication. The American Conservative wrote a piece that basically says everything Royce just said. That at this point, because of the way we have this fake private profit, not-for-profit, weird system, and there are so few hospitals because you lose so much money trying to open that. And then again, I'm quoting the American Conservative. They say it's absurd to
something you never thought you'd say.
They say it's absurd to call this the free market.
Yeah.
And that for just basic economic sense, we need socialized healthcare. The one small caveat I do want to add to this conversation is we're not talking about the care patients receive. That's a whole other conversation that we can't even get to, because right now the reason Amy has a job and thousands of cases is one person gets sick and their entire family for 2 generations might go bankrupt taking care of that person.
Yeah.
Or might be making decisions about, okay, our kid goes to school, but maybe we cut back on our groceries this month because we're still helping grandma with her meds, or someone quit their job to help with healthcare with grandma.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's lost from all of our healthcare debates, is we're not even at the point where we can have the discussion of how do we get better care to patients. Right now, we're at the point of how can we get more people who aren't afraid to see their doctor because of how much that bill's going to be. That's where we are right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in so many cases, it goes beyond that. You know, in social work, we talk about the hierarchy of needs. And there's some people that during this pandemic couldn't even meet the basic needs for food, shelter, clothing, all of that. I had a situation one time with a family. The dad was the primary breadwinner. They had 5 kids together. Mom got COVID and died. And the dad was like, well, first of all, I have to quarantine for a couple of weeks because of the COVID. And I can't work, but then I don't know who's going to take care of my kids because they can't go to school. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills, how I'm going to feed my family. These kids are 5, how I'm going to bury my wife that just passed away. So not only was he grieving, but just dealing with those hard, basic core needs that we all have. And so when you talk about healthcare on top of that, thank goodness that we did have the COVID relief that did pay for people's medical bills related to COVID, because so many of the people that did come into the hospital had minimal or no medical coverage. And so, you know, you're looking at bills that, I mean, some people were on ECMO, where they take the blood out of you and reoxygenate it and put it back in.
Wow.
And they were on machines that dialyzed them 24/7. So they were on CRT machines, they were on ventilators. You're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars in a bill that they racked up. And without that COVID relief and the insurance that funded people with COVID, those people have been stuck with those bills. And you're talking millions.
Wow. Royce and Ted, you talked about that. I mean, when it comes to the whole debate of universal health care, and I am by no means an expert on any of this, but my whole thing is, I mean, is that something that benefits everyone? Because I've kind of seen like the medical field as a teaching field. It just seems like, yeah, you're in it for like helping people out, but you get like the worst pay. So, I mean, does that work for everyone's benefit?
Well, okay. So
there's no short answer.
Yeah. my
I had
first
a feeling
comment,
that was going to be the answer.
My first comment is this: we actually already have socialized healthcare, but it's socialized for profit. And by that I mean the insurance companies run the fucking show, and we are socializing each other's medical care, but somebody's making money off of it. And that's the problem. that's for like fundamentally, that is the first problem that I see. So, because the second we're talking about profit, we're talking about them looking at what's the lowest common denominator that we can achieve and still be legally in business, because that the rest of that, the money that comes in is profit. And that's problematic. We can't have that in healthcare. It's not okay. And it already is socialized. Like all the problems we're having right now are problems of socialized medicine. It's just socialized for profit. And so if that's first off where I'm like, we have to shift this. So yeah, Ted, you had something else you wanted to say.
Honestly, the best thing I can say, and this is another casualty of calling doctors heroes and calling all, when you call someone a hero, you automatically start assuming knowledge that they actually don't truly have.
And boy, does it cover up a whole bunch of abuse, man.
That too. Oh, God. Pardon me a moment. Yes, you're correct. It does. Some memories. So what happens, and we're seeing this in COVID times 10, but it was already existing in the healthcare debate.
Yep.
Doctors and nurses make great interview people for a number of reasons. We tend to have a trillion of opinions. We tend to have a lot of experience. We tend to be really good at talking, and we tend to want to talk and want to share. Like, very few people go into either profession for bad reasons. Some people do. Very few do.
Yeah.
But that's very different from being an economist, from being a policy writer, from being a social worker. I mean, just another person in the same healthcare team.
Yeah.
And we get so wrapped up in wanting to hear from our heroes that we forget that a doctor in an emergency department can tell you about their experience in their emergency department. They can tell you what they're hearing. They can tell you what's happening amongst colleagues nationally that they're being engaged with. They might even be able to tell you about what the breakout looks like in their hospital, but they're not an epidemiologist. And that is a different specialty, and it's a different specialty for a reason. And we've gotten to this place where we're so afraid of specialists, and we're so convinced that specialists are myopically and stuck. And to a degree, you are when you specialize. I mean, that's kind of why you specialize. But the point is that we need to get everybody in the same room working together, because I'll tell you right now, if you had a system designed by the 5 nicest, kindest, best doctors and 5 best nurses you've ever met, it's still going to be a bad system, because these aren't people who plan for logistics. These aren't people who do the laundry in the hospital, who take care of the food in the hospital, who wash the dishes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when you're multiplying this on the national level, all of these things just blow up. So as I'm sorry, because I'm already giving you a long opinion, but it's a long opinion saying, like, we all have opinions, and they're informed opinions, but it's not necessarily the information we need.
And I think I love what you're pointing out too, the complexity of the hospital system. It, literally, when you look at the employee base of a hospital, it's a small city.
Yes.
It is literally everything. If you took the hospital and said, just these people go function as a city, they would fucking do it. And it would be amazing. As long as the insurance companies stayed out of it.
I think everybody's feeling like, yeah, I'm nodding about this problem of us being socialized for profit. Ouch.
So I want to ask a question about Ted's intro. You said PTSD is more common than you think. And I hear it touching. Okay, I heard it in your voice a couple of times there. So a question is, like, just to set this up, folks, when we talk about PTSD, I've been diagnosed with it. I have both pointed and complex PTSD. So there you go. That's fun. Go fuck around with that. But let's talk about it as, like, we think of PTSD as a soldier thing when a bomb goes off and, oh, that guy has PTSD. It's not that is one type of PTSD, but PTSD is a spectrum just like anything else. Complex PTSD is actually a term used for repeated traumas that might be less heavily presenting. There's no bomb that went off as a moment in time, but it's the death of 1,000 cuts from abuses and things like that. So there's a variety of ways PTSD presents. So Amy and Ted, like whichever you wants to jump into this first, but just like talk about what you're seeing right now around the topic of PTSD.
I think there's a lot of secondary PTSD. So it's PTSD from watching a lot of people pass and a lot of people experience their own trauma, then you're getting it secondary. And it's manifesting itself in so many ways where people are literally getting sick, they're overworked, they're tired, and on top of their emotions, having nightmares, not being able to eat very well, coming home and almost getting obsessive compulsive about their behaviors and hygiene. Really overdoing it, because of COVID and just being so worried. I had lots of people, friends, nurses, social workers who, because they were on the front lines, they would literally undress in the garage, run in and get in the shower and take a shower and get dressed before they even approach their families. And then I had some that literally sent their families away, and they just didn't want their families around them just because they were so afraid of them getting the COVID. And I think, you're looking at abandonment issues with that. You're looking at broken attachments with that. And then you're looking at just all in all, the secondary trauma that they've experienced watching all these people go through their traumas. And it's going to manifest itself greatly, like Ted said, in several years from now.
Yeah.
So secondary trauma is a huge thing, and that's one that a lot of people miss. The other piece to it is sometimes the experience won't be traumatizing, but your reaction to it will be where the trauma comes. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is a big part of my story and who I am and some of the weird quirks that a lot of people that love me do love me, but don't necessarily know the whole story, or even the people who do know the whole story. But so I was sexually abused at a very young age. And I'm not going to say there wasn't trauma there, but that was actually not the major hurt. The major hurt was years of confusion, and when I went to adults being told it was totally fine and normal, and why am I even asking about it? Or the worst was, so I'm trying not to give too much details. We're talking about a 14-year-old babysitter, and I was 7. So there's a significant age gap and a significant power gap. But we're also talking about a female and a male, and particularly a young female. So I actually at one point had, and I mean, the therapist caught themselves and stepped back from it. But she at first was like, well, why are you shaming this 14-year-old for sexual exploration?
Oh, boy.
And, well, here's the thing. She's not wrong.
Yep.
But when the roles are flipped, that's never the narrative.
Yep.
And there are very important pieces to both of these that really need to be explored and
regardless,
discussed. And
she's not the 14-year-old's therapist. She's
right.
Like, let's
Right.
just be clear about that too.
So that's an example where the incident itself was kind of confusing, but this is because that's statistically how it happens. It's someone close to you. This is someone who was around me for most of my life growing up, who was treated differently because men and women are treated differently. Never mind. I'm actually not going to say that because that comes too close to revealing who this person is for some people. And I don't want to do that. That's not the point. But secondary traumas can happen and don't necessarily come from the event itself.
And your point is so well taken. Like when I put that together with what Amy was talking about too, so that it's not just the fact that dad died and we were not there. Like for a child, dad just fucking disappeared. Like it was magic. All right. But then that's not even necessarily like that might be a seed for trauma, but it doesn't grow until somebody waters it and says, well, daddy's in heaven. It's all this other crazy shit that is just like blows things up. He's in a better place. Well, what's better than being present with me as a child? Right. Like that kind of stuff that we're talking about. So how we talk to people who are dealing with grief and pain, especially extreme grief and pain, matters.
I'll real quickly say the opposite can happen.
Oh,
So
yeah, go.
one of the best memories from my great-grandfather's funeral, my brother and my cousins were all about 6, 5, 4. They were all in the same like really young cohort. And the absolutely sweetest memory happened. And thank God my Uncle Joe handled it correctly of just like, this is kids being kids processing and let them be.
Yeah.
But one of them went, I think Grandpa looked like this. And the other one, no, Grandpa was lying like this. And then the eldest got it right of like, and they were like, oh yeah. And then they all laid down in a row and did it. And thankfully, this was a case where he just let them play. Like they were taking care of themselves. They were doing, but that very easily could have been a don't do that. Don't talk about that this way. Don't. And again, for their age at that point in time, that's developmentally appropriate. That's literally how they're processing the world. Of Grandpa has changed. His body has physically changed, and now it looks like this instead of what it used to look like.
Wow. Amy, I know you got a comment here.
No, I feel that. Like, I feel exactly what you're saying. And we saw that all the time because kids don't experience grief the way we do with adults. You know, you might tell them somebody passes and they just may, okay, they just don't experience it. But then later on, when they realize, hey, I haven't seen this person in a while, what does that really mean to die? So it makes the adults then have to re-experience the trauma too. And then these kids watching their other parent, the dad died, watching the mom fall apart, trying to keep it together and try and figure out life again and how to go on from that experience. That's another trauma as well. So, they say that the foundation of a lot of mental health problems stems from trauma. And you know what? Guess what? The whole world is experiencing a lot of trauma right now.
Yes. Yeah.
So I real quick, I know just because we're running out of time, for any listeners that are a little bit confused by this, go watch the movie Frozen. Frozen is an exploration of post-traumatic stress disorder. The song Reindeer Are Better Than People and the song Let It Go is the exact same song. It's about avoiding people because you can't get emotionally close.
Wow.
And two common reactions you'll see are what Anna does. People are good. I must be around people. People are great. I love crazy. You love crazy. Let's be crazy together. All right. Shared trauma, grief.
Wow.
I got it too. Here's mine. Here's yours. And the opposite is I can't be
around any of you.
I can't be around any of you either because you're too much or I'm too much. And usually it's a kind of a combination of both. Like a lot of times the Elsas, like Elsa's character, they're not running away because they're necessarily afraid of other people. They're afraid of what they're going to do to other people.
Yeah. Afraid of being the one that causes the trauma to someone else. Yeah. And oh God, where'd it go? There was a bit. The other thing here, just like anytime we encounter death and stuff, please be clear that when we're talking, especially to children, telling kids that someone is in a quote unquote better place, telling them that their death had a purpose, all of these different things. I really urge people to resist making meaning in those ways. It creates it's making meaning in ways that contributes to trauma when we can be making meaning in the ways that human beings really need to be making meaning, which is what's your favorite memory of Grandpa, or what's something you never want to forget about your dad.
Or even one step further, you can affirm something they did in that person's life. Like one of the things we're trained as EMTs to say, instead of, well, they're in a better place or any of that, because who knows, you're in a random person's house. Who knows what their beliefs are? One of the best things you can say, and I've said this and seen it, is, you kind of look around and you say, well, when I look at this house, I can tell they were very well taken care of.
Yeah.
Or to a child, Grandma really loved it. In my case, when you took her to church, like I know, and I still say that to myself, Grandma loved it when I took her to church.
You are making
all
people
about the connection.
Yes.
Yeah. So my apologies. Ted, you're like causing people to like freak out about this whole Frozen thing. So true. Frozen as metaphor to PTSD. We got Carly. OMG. I never even thought of Frozen in that way, but you are so right, Ted. Wow. Oh yeah.
And
And yeah, he's back. Frozen also puts a lot of blame on the kids when in their childhood, a parent friend pointed out why it wasn't necessary to make Elsa wrong to have her powers or to imprison her to fix things.
yep.
I'm going to
Which
look at this movie completely different now.
it is really huge. Folks that study trauma look at one of the, oh God, I'm trying to remember where I read about this, or was it actually a conversation with my brother-in-law? He's a therapist. I think it was probably with him. Anyway, he was talking about the fact that one of the tricky things about trauma is that it isn't the event. So one person gets hit, but they feel for some reason like they have agency or whatever, and they have defenses, or they can escape, and they're not traumatized by the event. But another person gets hit, and because they're trapped, because they don't have an out, because they have no defenses, that becomes the trauma. So it what we're talking about here about our responses to painful events, they're the thing that is a better indicator of whether someone will be traumatized and develop something like PTSD than the event itself. So just to be really clear, that's what Diatom is pointing out there is fucking huge. It is the thing when we make people wrong because of simply who they are, and their power in the world. Geez, man, that's a great way to traumatize the fuck out of somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with the fact that she could shoot icicles. Like, nothing to do with it.
Right. I actually envy you, Teresa, because I've never been able to watch Frozen as anything but that. Because when I saw it the first time, I saw it immediately.
And
Honestly, the first time I saw
Watch it
Frozen, I'm
again.
like, that's that chick that was in Rent. Like,
It's Maureen.
Maureen did Frozen. I mean,
Oh my
yeah.
God. I just cried my eyeballs out. And then Frozen 2 just went further. Like, anyway, okay. I got to go watch the damn movies again, because now it's a metaphor for trauma. Okay.
Well,
Last word.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. I would like to end it by asking you guys what the public, I mean, I know right now we got vaccines. Vaccines are here. People are at least starting to wear their mask. I mean, is there anything you want to tell our viewers and the public? Just some things to think about over this time as all this stuff is going into motion that they might be, wanting to address or take care of or keep in mind.
I would say don't give up hope, number one. And number two, don't stop taking care of each other. I think, the media is really good about just saying negative things all the time, but there's a lot of positives that came from COVID too, and a lot of examples of people loving each other and taking care of each other and doing kind things. And let's not forget to be kind to one another always.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how about you, Ted?
Find connection in giving. Whether it's if you're like, I cannot give, I'm tapped out right now. Find someone who just wants to play cards and play cards with them. Find someone who just wants to play D&D. Like, you can give through something you're going to do anyway. But if you can give emotionally, just throw things out to friends from time to time. Hey, if you ever want to chat, let's chat. Hey, if you ever need to get something off your chest and you just want someone to listen and not respond, I'll do that. Also, always offer that. It's amazingly powerful to someone, for both people, to just listen. And finally, if you can afford it, give money. I mean, I have bought computers for teachers with some. I mean, honestly, I made so much overtime that, so long as I'm not stupid, I will be okay for a little bit. So I've been buying teachers computers. I met a random person on the internet who's I followed their podcast and they're streaming and they want to do more video game streaming, but they can't do that because they don't have the setup. So I donated $1,000 because I can. There's a nurse in Pittsburgh who her dream was always to write a book, and she had children that she had to raise as a single mother. So she's now, because they're teenagers, wants to write her book. I contributed to her Kickstart campaign and made a friend in the process. And when that Kickstarter succeeded, it was a little bump for me because it was this community. It wasn't her. It wasn't me. It was this community. And yes, we can still find our connection. So please find it through giving and give what you can. Don't force yourself to give something you can't.
Absolutely.
That's
Thanks for
very
having
good.
me.
Thanks
Yeah.
for coming on. And I got to bring this one up. Are the guest speakers from different states or all nearby?
I'm
Different
in New
states.
Mexico.
New
And
Mexico
Ted
and
is
California.
Oh, okay. They're all from New Mexico, and I'm
Yeah.
from California.
I was born out there. I get it.
But represented in our chat, there's at least one Maryland, a couple Californias. There's a Seattle, Washington. There's a Florida. So we've got a community right here, right now.
Nice, very nice. And bravo, Ted, self-care and community care. And ending Kelly off to say Ted found the antidote to isolation. Everybody's gonna, yep. So once again, thank you for coming on today and sharing your experience. And yes, Ted, I was like, when I think of heroes, I never look at the knowledge. It's just looking at the person doing something that I couldn't imagine doing, but find inspiration because they took the initiative to do it. So I will say thank you for inspiring us and helping and doing what you love, even in the most trying times.
And doing it out loud.
Exactly.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to send you all back now. Thank you again for coming.
And I guess I do have to say one more thing. Just like pats on the back and thank yous to quote unquote heroes. Part of the reason that I hear that we just, the hero culture has to be questioned is because in the end, what we're talking about are people who need real wages, need real health care themselves. Like if you want to say, what can I do for my teachers? Vote for their raises, vote for their healthcare increases, vote for them to have real paternity and maternity leave, parental leave, vote for policies that benefit these people in very real and concrete ways and make their lives better.
It is very clear that this discussion needs to be had even further, that it's more than just what's happening in the now. This has been an ongoing. So this is definitely something that needs to be discussed even further. So I'm hoping that people do that they get more involved. And if they really want to help, they now have seen a glimpse of how they can do it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Glad to be here again with you, Royce.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you so much for, like somebody mentioned it earlier, the appreciation time for Teresa. I'm seeing these emails going on. I'm like, when I was moving, there was no way. Like I didn't even have fucking internet. So I don't know.
My computer was the first thing I set up. I wasn't messing around like that. I was like, that was the first thing I set up.
The background set up again too. Like, look at you go.
Because I could not have people looking at my bed. Like I just somewhat professional.
I love it.
Somewhat. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us on Monday, as you do every Monday. Once again, reminder, click the subscription button so you can be with us every Monday and get those reminders by clicking the notification bell when we have new content. And we are, I believe, 25 people away to hit our goal of 100 subscribers. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell your kids, whoever you need to tell. Have them come on board as a subscriber and join us for Where's Your Heart every Monday.
See you next Monday.
Bye, everyone.